The light within the synodic apex was not meant to simulate a star, but rather the collective, diffused intelligence of a billion minds spread across 1,000 orbital installations. A vast, oppressive, pale blue luminescence that seemed to filter through the very air, lending an ethereal, almost suffocating gravity to the proceedings. The great chamber, carved from a single moon-sized asteroid core and shielded by layers of transdimensional plating, hummed with a low, resonant frequency, the sustained heartbeat of the Carthian hegemony, the oldest, most politically intricate empire in the known galactic sphere. Its tiered structure rose dizzyingly high, ringed by hundreds of observation platforms, each occupied by the silent, judging presence of lesser species delegates and the cloaked, unmoving automatons of the internal security mandate. At the center upon the primary discourse platform stood Cathar, the hegemony's chief diplomat, his chitinous carapace, usually a shimmering indigo hue of serene confidence, now displaying erratic, near-black stress fractures beneath the pale light. He did not look at the delegates, but directly at the Grand Arbiter, an ancient being of pure, solidified gravity and slow, measured movements, who rested at the apex of the platform. The silence was the heaviest thing in the room, a pressurized vacuum preceding a political decompression of catastrophic potential. "We have permitted a calculation error to transition into a strategic liability," Cathar stated, his voice modulated to a low, gravelly vibration that nevertheless carried clearly across the vast distance, devoid of any emotional inflection, yet heavy with implied consequence. The humans, designate Terran Mandate 7 Delta, were deemed an inconsequential buffer state, a minor, fractious polity useful only for absorbing the residual skirmishes along the Cygnian perimeter. Their technological capacity was assessed at an average 3 on the 9 scale, their political structure juvenile, and their philosophical depth negligible. We required an immediate, untraceable solution to the Phaeton dilemma, a problem vessel that threatened to destabilize our own internal power matrices should we attempt to dismantle it within hegemony space. The decision, ratified by the Security Directorate and the Engineering Conclave, was to offload this liability onto the Terrans. The logic was sound. They would either fail to activate the vessel, destroying themselves in the attempt, or they would achieve a brief, unstable flight, thereby justifying its condemnation and relieving us of the political burden of its existence. We were wrong. A single, rasping exhalation was audible from the strategic commander, Voral, a being of hardened, silvered metalloid tissue who stood opposite Cathar on the platform. Voral's disdain for Cathar's diplomatic caution was legendary, a simmering political feud based on the hegemony's foundational dichotomy: absolute strategic dominance versus careful, measured political control. Voral lifted a single, multi-jointed appendage, its movement sharp and dismissive. Chief Diplomat Cathar speaks in the language of fear, which is the province of the unaligned. The Phaeton is an antique, a prototype of the discarded harmonic drive, a fusion-implosion engine that relies on an impossibly precise, sustained mental synchronicity with its operator to maintain stability. Our own best pilots, trained for 6 cycles in the disciplines of the silent mind, achieved a peak stability of 77% for a mere 11 cycles of standardized time. The engine then threatened to tear the vessel apart. The Terrans, creatures of raw, untamed emotion and volatile neural activity, could not logically even attempt the initiation sequence without disintegrating their fragile cerebral structures. Their success, Cathar, is statistical noise. They have achieved one stable flight test. 1. It does not warrant this assembly, nor the palpable anxiety you radiate into the apex's atmosphere. Noise that generated a sustained power signature of 99.8% stability for 3 standard Terran days. Cathar countered, his voice suddenly deepening, cutting through Voral's arrogance with the cold weight of verified data. He signaled, and the pale blue light of the apex shifted subtly, focusing on a display that materialized between them. A complex, spiraling matrix of energy output, overlaid by a stark, flat red line representing the hegemony's previously achieved maximum, and a towering, unbroken green column that dwarfed it. This reading is not theoretical. It is not statistical noise. It is verified telemetry from a remote monitoring station. The human pilot, an individual named Rhys Kalin, did not merely operate the harmonic drive. He mastered it. The Phaeton, which we relegated to them as a sophisticated, self-destructing cage, is now the fastest vessel in the immediate galactic quadrant, possessing a near-infinite energy yield, and crucially, a stability that our most advanced computational models deemed biologically impossible for any known, non-synthetic organism. They were given the most dangerous ship we possessed, and they have, with a frightening, silent professionalism, transformed it into a vehicle of unimaginable strategic potential. The Grand Arbiter, the ancient being at the apex, finally stirred, a slow, geological settling of its immense mass. Its voice, when it spoke, was not a sound but a resonance that echoed not in the air but within the very bone structure of every being present, a vibration of absolute, unquestioned authority. The assessment of the Terran mind. It was based on the premise of self-interest and emotional volatility. Explain the catastrophic failure in this foundational assessment. Strategic Commander Vorel. Vorel stiffened, the silvered carapace losing none of its rigidity. Arbiter, the failure is not in the assessment of the Terran mind, but perhaps in the unpredictable nature of the harmonic drive itself. The data still indicates irrational behavior, emotional volatility, tribal loyalty, and a disturbing lack of focus on internal political power acquisition. They are a species driven by concepts like ethical imperative and self-sacrifice, traits that should be antithetical to the precise, self-serving mental discipline required to operate the drive. Our pilots failed because their minds were naturally preoccupied with the power the drive represented, the political advancement it would afford them. The internal conflict between ambition and control created the instability. These Terrans, by contrast, appear to possess no such ambition for the power itself. They approach it as a mere tool to achieve an external, seemingly benign objective, a logistical function. This level of detachment from self-interest, Arbiter, is the irrationality that defies our models. Cathar shifted his weight, his stress fractures momentarily receding as he seized the opening. Detachment from self-interest is not irrationality, Commander. It is an alien form of focus. Our failure was in confusing the object of ambition with the form of ambition. We sought control through internal stillness, a self-serving discipline. They achieved control through external imperative, a self-negating ethical focus. The pilot, Kalen, was not trying to master the engine for his own glory or power. He was trying to fulfill a mission for the preservation of his crew and the execution of a diplomatic mandate. The harmonic drive demands perfect synchronization, not just of thought, but of intent. The moment our pilots focused on the reward, the power, the status, the drive, which is fundamentally a system of pure, unfettered energy, mirrored that internal conflict and threatened implosion. The human pilot, Kalen, appears to have achieved a state where his intent was singular, selfless, and entirely focused on the external task, creating a smooth, stable conduit for the raw energy. He made the harmonic drive an extension of his duty, not his ego. The most dangerous ship was dangerous only to those whose minds were poisoned by the pursuit of power for its own sake. To the human, it is simply a highly efficient means of rapid transit. The implications hung in the air, vast and terrifying to the hegemony, whose entire political and technological philosophy was built upon the ruthless acquisition and centralized control of power. The Terrans were succeeding because they were not like the Carthians, because their mindset had bypassed the internal psychological flaw that had crippled the hegemony's grandest technological innovation. The silent delegation platforms stirred, their previous judgment of the Terrans as primitive now replaced by a chilling realization. They were dealing with a force that played by a different, incomprehensible rule set. The mandate they were given was intentionally ludicrous, Vorel growled, unable to accept the philosophical defeat. A logistical resupply run across the shifting veil to the isolated colony of Xylos, a system riddled with gravitational anomalies and under constant siege from the void-scarred pirate collective. A mission designed to consume the ship and the crew to remove the problem gracefully. Yet the telemetry confirms they are not only traversing the veil with unprecedented speed, but the Phaeton's enhanced sensor package, a discarded experimental system we were certain they would never calibrate, is reporting detailed, real-time gravitational field stabilization data. They are not merely surviving the veil, they are mapping and taming it. Cathar projected a secondary image, a communication matrix with the Xylos system. It was currently a flat, red field, indicating zero transmission capability due to the veil's interference. Commander Vorel's assessment of the mission's intent is accurate. However, the intent of the humans was simply to deliver the cargo. Humanitarian shipment of biostabilizers for the Xylan population, promised under the terms of a minor, insignificant treaty. Now, the stakes have shifted. The hegemony is currently under immense strain, stretched thin by the rift incursions in the eastern sectors. Our entire defensive perimeter relies on maintaining stability in the Xylos region to prevent a catastrophic flank collapse. The Void-scarred pirates know this. If the Terran ship succeeds, if they deliver the stabilizers, they do not merely fulfill a promise. They stabilize a pivotal political sector that the hegemony has been incapable of managing for 3 generations. They will have conquered the geopolitical volatility of the region through a simple, unwavering act of delivery. The Arbiter's resonance returned, heavier this time. The consequence of success must be measured against the structure of the hegemony. If the Terrans stabilize Xylos, they gain immense diplomatic leverage, a foundation for a unified Terran mandate with the implicit endorsement of a grateful population. This leverage is power. They were given a liability. They have forged a political weapon that targets the very instability upon which our internal power structures are balanced. What is the diplomatic proposal, Cathar? There can be no immediate diplomatic proposal beyond absolute transparency and perhaps carefully managed awe, Cathar responded, his voice now laced with a strange, cold pride that defied his earlier fear. We cannot afford to let them fail, for their failure will mean the collapse of Xylos and the subsequent hegemony flank. We cannot afford to intervene militarily, for that would expose our weakness and the true nature of the Phaeton project, alienating every buffer state. Our only strategic maneuver is to trust the very illogical ethical imperative that we find so bewildering. We must now rely on their dedication to a promise to save our empire from a threat we were too self-serving to address effectively. I propose a state of political stasis, absolute non-interference. We observe the Terran Mandate 7 Delta and their vessel, the Phaeton, until the mission is complete. We learn. We adapt. We prepare for the inevitable shift in the galactic power dynamic they represent. Voral's appendage slammed onto the platform, a sound like grinding tectonic plates. Unacceptable. We cannot surrender control to an unknown variable. They are traversing a route only the Phaeton could endure, giving them access to information regarding our deepest perimeter defenses. We must deploy a monitoring fleet, a squadron of the Void Hunters, to shadow them, to ensure they do not deviate from the logistical mandate, to be prepared to neutralize the vessel should the pilot lose control or attempt to breach restricted sectors, and risk the Terran pilot perceiving intervention as betrayal, shattering the synchronization and turning the Phaeton into a weapon of mass destruction in the most volatile strategic sector we possess, Cathar countered, his tone scathing. Your military logic, Commander, assumes the Terran mind operates on the same paranoid, aggressive self-preservation that defines our own. We must assume they are operating with the very ethical clarity that has, improbably, made this vessel stable. Interference is destabilization. Non-interference is the only path to safety, and perhaps the only path to a solution to the Xylos crisis. The Grand Arbiter remained still, the light of the apex momentarily dimming, absorbing the implications of the debate. The hegemony was facing a moral and technological paradox. The ship they had intended as a grave for a troublesome technology had become a magnifying glass reflecting the crippling flaws of their own imperial psyche. The fate of a pivotal sector rested on the ethical reliability of the very species they had deemed an insignificant pawn. The silence stretched, a vacuum of political and existential dread. The void outside the cockpit canopy of the Phaeton was a living, malignant tapestry of gravitational shearing and temporal stuttering, the shifting veil. The stars, usually fixed points of ancient light, seemed to stretch, fracture, and snap back with violent speed, a physical manifestation of the immense energy required to cross this space-time anomaly. Captain Rhys Kalin sat motionless in the pilot's harness, the control interface of the harmonic drive not a panel of lights and levers, but a neurological nexus woven directly into the ship's primary systems, requiring a seamless, perfect feedback loop between human consciousness and quantum mechanics. He was not manipulating the ship, he was being the ship's stability. His world was the low, resonant thrum of the drive, the endless, subtle correction of intent that kept the raw, chaotic power contained within the vessel's inertial dampeners. He did not feel the G-forces, for the harmonic drive, when stable, created its own localized field of perfect stasis. He felt only the delicate, humming balance between existence and annihilation. The Carthian engineers, in their arrogance, had designed a power source that demanded a level of psychological purity they themselves could not achieve. They believed ambition, the drive for power, was inherent to control. Reese knew the opposite was true. Control here was achieved through absolute surrender of the ego to the external demand of the mission. The humanitarian cargo of biostabilizers, the treaty, the promise to the vulnerable Xylan populace, these were not abstract political tools, but the concrete ethical anchors of his mind. Every subtle adjustment to the drive was a moral calculation. Keep the power contained, maintain the trajectory, fulfill the promise. The self was irrelevant, the duty was absolute. Beside him, Ambassador Alara Vance, the principal Terran diplomat, sat at the communications console, her focus equally intense, yet outwardly calm. She was the mission's political gyroscope, the buffer between Kalen's pure focus and the bewildering complexity of alien interaction. The Carthians had provided them with ancient, near-useless sensor logs and a single, condescending line of communication that was now, predictably, silent. "Status, Captain?" Ilara's voice was a soft inquiry, a necessary check on the fragile equilibrium. Kalen's response was a low, steady frequency. "Synchronization remains at 99.8. Fluctuation margin is negligible. The veil is denser than predicted, but the drive compensates. We are maintaining peak velocity, on schedule for primary insertion into the Xylos system in 3 standard cycles. The cargo bay sensors confirm integrity. The biostabilizers are holding." "And the Carthian hegemony?" "Silence, complete suppression of all long-range passive and active scanning signatures. They are observing, but they are not interfering. It suggests Cathar's faction holds the political ground, or Voral's paranoia is temporarily restrained by the magnitude of the consequence. They calculated failure. They are paralyzed by success. Their political architecture, Alara, relies on managed risk. We, by existing, are an unmanaged variable. A stable harmonic drive is a contradiction in their reality." Alara nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the blank, uncommunicative primary screen. "Our assessment of the Carthian hegemony was based on their documented history, a culture of intricate paranoid politics where every act of aid is a Trojan horse for assimilation, and every show of force is an invitation to rebellion. They offered us the Phaeton, a political disposal mechanism. We accepted it not because we were fools, but because we understood its true, underlying nature. We identified the psychological flaw in their design philosophy. That power must be wielded instead of channeled. Our collective history, our generations of self-inflicted crises, taught us the absolute necessity of ethical self-restraint as the prerequisite for handling catastrophic energy. We found the core requirement of the harmonic drive, not in a mathematical constant, but in a moral one. We will prove their hypothesis of our volatility to be profoundly incorrect," Kalen affirmed, his focus tightening further as a massive gravitational shear wave approached the Phaeton. The ship shuddered, not from impact, but from the immense energy pulse required to stabilize its localized field against the crushing force. The engine responded instantaneously to his focused intent. A thought, not a command, and the ship righted itself, the energy matrix remaining a serene, unbroken green. The political conquest is not in taking Xylos, but in saving it, thereby forcing the hegemony to acknowledge that the ethical use of power is more potent than the political manipulation of weakness. That is the leverage we seek, the moral authority to sit at the table, not as petitioners, but as partners. Suddenly, the secondary sensor array, the advanced, high-resolution module that the Carthians had deemed inoperable due to its complex neural calibration requirements, flickered to life. The Carthians had dismissed the system, believing no non-synthetic mind could process the sheer volume of data it provided. But Kalen, operating the harmonic drive, was already in a state of profound neural synchronization. He was accessing the system subconsciously, using the drive's pure energy state to bypass the computational bottleneck. "Alara, I have a contact," Kalen murmured, his eyes fixed on the spatial distortion ahead. "Not the veil, something within the veil, multiple signatures. They are heavily cloaked and utilizing irregular, low-power jump tactics. Void-scarred pirate collective patrols. They are anticipating the hegemony's usual lumbering supply convoys." "They will not be expecting us," Alara stated, her hand hovering over the communication activation rune. "The Carthians designed this sector to be a choke point. Why rely on the pirates to bleed the hegemony's resources, maintaining a useful, low-grade crisis that justifies the military budget? If we traverse the region too quickly, we disrupt the balance. We must be visible but uncatchable. We must assert the Phaeton's presence, not as a military threat, but as a demonstration of superior logistics." Kalen executed a minor, almost imperceptible correction in the harmonic flow. The Phaeton did not accelerate. It simply moved faster, the velocity shifting instantly with the change in intent. On the sensor display, the pirate signatures, previously appearing to be distant specks, were now rushing toward them, their cloaking systems sputtering ineffectually against the Phaeton's unexpectedly calibrated sensor suite. "They are detecting us," Kalen confirmed. "Their analysis will categorize us as an extremely fast, high-value target, a single, small, unescorted vessel in the Veil. They will assume the hegemony is testing a new, vulnerable courier. They will commit assets." "Let them commit," Ilara said, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. "The objective is to not fire a single weapon, but to force them to react to a variable they cannot quantify. We need to broadcast a message. Not a plea for help, not a warning of force, but a statement of absolute, focused intent. Prepare the diplomatic packet. I want to transmit a full, unencrypted manifest of the biostabilizer shipment, the exact logistical route, and a public, official declaration that the Terran Mandate has undertaken this mission as a promise of ethical neutrality to the Xylos system. Flood the local band." Kalen understood the strategy immediately. The pirates operated on the assumption of greed, on the hegemony's self-serving calculus. They would expect a trap, a lure, or a military escort. Ilara was giving them transparency, an act so antithetical to the political culture of the region that it would induce a paralysis of analysis. They would be forced to pause, to debate, to calculate the impossible variable. A vessel with the speed of a hegemony dreadnought, yet carrying only humanitarian aid and ethical neutrality. The Phaeton was a technological marvel. The transparency was the political weapon. The broadcast was initiated. The raw, unfiltered data packet exploded onto the local communications band, a beacon of bewildering honesty in a space defined by deception. Back in the Synodic apex, the tension had not dissipated. It had coagulated into a suffocating political poison. Hours had passed, stretching into a near-continuous watch. Cathar remained at the primary discourse platform, silent, his body language a taut wire of contained anticipation. Voral, though outwardly rigid, was a volcano of suppressed rage, pacing the periphery of the platform with the heavy tread of a thwarted predator. The Grand Arbiter was still, an immovable point of observation. The real-time telemetry from the remote monitor, usually a lagging, patchy stream of data, was now arriving with frightening precision, fed by the unexpected efficiency of the Phaeton's own auxiliary sensors. A technician automaton at the sensor station suddenly spoke, its voice a synthesized monotone that cut through the silence like a scalpel. "Anomaly. Multiple localized high-density cloaked signatures have been detected near the Terran vessel's projected route. Confirmed void-scarred pirate collective assets. They have committed a significant force, including several heavy interdiction craft." Voral's carapace shifted, a flicker of satisfaction crossing his rigid features. "Now, Cathar. Now the variables are simplified. The primitives will panic, their pilot will lose control, and the Phaeton will either be destroyed by the pirates or implode under the stress of the loss of synchronization. The crisis resolves itself. Order the immediate deployment of the Void Hunters, not to intervene, but to secure the debris field and recover the harmonic drive core before the collective can claim the technology." "Silence, Commander," Cathar commanded, the authority in his voice absolute, silencing even the automaton mid-report. "Observe the data stream. The humans are not diverting. They are not transmitting a distress signal. They are maintaining peak velocity directly into the interdiction point." The sensor reading shifted. The technician resumed its report, its monotone now betraying a subtle, almost unreadable note of confusion. "The Terran vessel, the Phaeton, has initiated an external transmission. Full spectrum, unencrypted. It is broadcasting a comprehensive logistical manifest, including cargo contents, mission parameters, and a diplomatic declaration of neutrality and humanitarian intent toward the Xylos system." A wave of bewildered murmuring swept through the observation platforms. It was an act of tactical insanity, transmitting valuable intelligence directly to the enemy. It defied every known military and dipl. Amatic protocol of the hegemony. Voral stared at the display, the confidence draining from his posture. "They are surrendering. They are attempting to negotiate with the collective, a negotiation that will end in their slavery or execution. Predictable, the logic of the weak seeking protection through appeasement." Cathar shook his head slowly, his gaze fixed on the converging contact points. No, Commander, they are not surrendering. They are introducing a philosophical conflict into a tactical engagement. The Void-scarred pirates operate on pure self-interest. They expect a prize, a capture, a negotiation based on threat and resource. The human is giving them nothing to negotiate with except the integrity of a humanitarian delivery. If the pirates destroy the Phaeton, they gain debris and the hegemony's wrath. If they capture it, they gain an intractable, high-value political liability and a vessel they cannot operate. If they ignore it, they allow a precedent of successful, unescorted delivery, which undermines their entire control over the Veil sector. The Terrans have not used a weapon, they have used a paradox. The seconds that followed were a torturous eternity in the apex. The two signatures, the single, fast-moving Terran vessel and the clustered pirate fleet, converged. The screen showed the moment of interception. And then, impossibly, the pirate signatures began to diverge. Not in pursuit, but in confused, erratic maneuvers. "Report," Vorel demanded, his voice a strained, harsh sound. "The pirate fleet is dispersing," the automaton reported, the synthesized confusion more pronounced. "They are not engaging. They are attempting complex, low-power interrogation scans on the Phaeton, but the Terran vessel's velocity and energy field are making stable contact impossible. The pirate command structure appears to be in a state of internal debate. They cannot rationalize the target's intent. They are letting it pass." Cathar let out a single, slow exhalation, the stress fractures on his carapace momentarily vanishing, replaced by a deep indigo of profound, cold realization. The ethical imperative has proven to be a superior stealth technology to any cloak we possess. The human pilot, Kalen, did not just maintain synchronization. He calibrated the Phaeton's velocity to maintain a perfectly stable, maximum possible traversal speed, ensuring he remained just outside the theoretical range of the pirates' primary interdiction weaponry, making any engagement an unacceptable risk for an unquantifiable reward. They did not conquer the pirates with force. They conquered them with superior logic and purity of intent. The political consequences reverberated instantly through the apex. Vorel staggered back a step, the reality of the strategic failure too immense to be immediately processed. The Carthian hegemony, which had prided itself on its strategic cunning, had been tactically defeated by the simple, ethical consistency of a single, underestimated Terran crew. They had exposed the pirates' weakness, their reliance on predictable greed, and simultaneously demonstrated a technological superiority born not of raw power, but of psychological mastery. The Grand Arbiter finally broke its silence, its resonance filling the apex with a low, mournful tone. "We underestimated the Terrans' capacity for sustained ethical focus. We defined control as the subjugation of external forces. They have defined control as the subjugation of the internal ego. The harmonic drive, the most dangerous ship, was only dangerous to the self-serving mind. The Terrans, by utilizing it for a purpose entirely outside of self-aggrandizement, have achieved an ethical and technological parity with us, born from our own failure of imagination." The Arbiter's words were a death sentence for Vorel's political standing and an irreversible mandate for Cathar's faction. The rules of engagement with the Terran mandate had changed forever. 3 cycles later, the Phaeton arrived at Xylos. The orbital defense grid of the embattled colony, weakened by decades of neglect and constant pirate raids, was a patchwork of sputtering energy shields and automated gun platforms running on near-depleted reserves. The atmosphere was thick with the dust of repeated orbital bombardments. Yet as the Phaeton materialized from its final, smooth jump, the silence of its arrival, devoid of the usual violent spatial turbulence, was a stark, unsettling contrast to the violence that defined the sector. Ambassador Alara Vance initiated the communication sequence, broadcasting on the Xylos emergency channels. "This is the Terran Mandate vessel Phaeton. We are unescorted. We carry a full complement of the promised biostabilizer D3 stock. We request immediate, safe landing coordinates and confirmation of the primary diplomatic contact. Our intent is strictly logistical and humanitarian." The response was immediate, yet cautious, transmitted by a XY. Land Colonial Administrator whose voice was tight with exhaustion and suspicion. "Phaeton, this is Xylos Command. We were told the hegemony supply route was interdicted. We expected nothing. We certainly did not expect a single vessel of this profile. Identify your propulsion signature. It does not match hegemony standards." Our propulsion system is a salvaged and modified harmonic drive, Alara responded with unwavering calm. Its operation is reliant on a stable, sustained intent. Our intent is fixed, delivery of aid. We breached the shifting veil at peak velocity and passed through the pirate interdiction zone without incident or conflict. We are here, Administrator, because we gave a promise, and we possess the means to uphold it. The implication hung heavy. The hegemony had promised, but failed. The Terrans had promised, and succeeded using the very ship the hegemony intended as a failure. The moral victory was instantaneous. Landing was smooth, a seamless descent that demonstrated the Phaeton's perfect stability, a precision landing in the heart of the main colonial complex, a place previously deemed too dangerous for hegemony vessels. As the cargo ramps lowered, exposing the gleaming containers of biostabilizers, the Xylan populace, skeptical, weary, but desperate, emerged from the protective bunkers. The meeting between Alara and the Xylan administrator, a weathered, elderly being named C.H. Laris, took place not in a formal chamber, but beside the open cargo bay, in the dust and the strained silence of a population teetering on the edge of despair. "Your vessel, the Speed," C.H. Laris murmured, not looking at Alara but at the flawless lines of the Phaeton. "The hegemony ships take weeks, months, and require a full battle escort to even approach the Veil. You were here in days. How did you evade the Void Scarred?" "We did not evade them, Administrator," Alara explained, her voice low and serious. "We transcended them. They operate on a principle of resource acquisition through violence and fear. We operated on a principle of absolute, transparent ethical necessity. They expected a struggle over resources. We offered them only the simple, undeniable fact of a diplomatic promise being fulfilled. Our speed, combined with our published intent, created a barrier of confusion and paralysis they could not overcome without resorting to an act of blatant, indefensible aggression against a purely humanitarian mission. Their political self-interest prevented them from acting against the Phaeton. Our ship is fast, but our logic is faster." The implications were profound. The Terrans had shown the Xylan populace, and the listening, politically fragmented buffer states, that the hegemony's strategy of maintaining control through managed conflict with the pirates was a sham. A small, unaligned species, using a dangerous prototype, had achieved stability by ignoring the hegemony's political rules and applying a pure, unwavering ethical standard. Rhys Kalen, having secured the ship, joined Alara, his presence radiating the deep, almost meditative calm required for the harmonic drive's operation. He spoke to C.H. Laris, not of technology, but of necessity. "Administrator, the Phaeton requires a unique psychological focus. Its engine is a conduit, and its stability is a function of the operator's mental state. I needed to know, absolutely, that the cargo was essential, that the objective was pure, and that the sacrifice of my own sustained focus was worthwhile. The hegemony gave us this ship, believing its inherent instability would match our perceived political volatility. We stabilized it by applying the only thing that creates true stability, unwavering, selfless purpose. We now offer this purpose and the technology born of it to Xylos. This was the conquest foreseen by the hegemony's inner circle, not a military invasion, but a political and philosophical colonization of the heart and mind. The Terrans were not merely delivering aid. They were exporting a system of reliable, ethical operation, a direct challenge to the hegemony's chaotic political model. Over the next few cycles, the Terran team began the distribution, but Alara also initiated an unprecedented diplomatic sequence. She did not contact the hegemony, she contacted the pirate collective. She transmitted a formal, open-channel diplomatic communique to the pirate leadership, detailing the success of the Xylos mission, and offering them a full, unencrypted report on the Phaeton's harmonic drive technology, if they ceased all hostilities against humanitarian targets, and agreed to a formalized, enforced no-fire treaty zone around Xylos. The pirate response was one of stunned outrage and deep internal division. The offer was a trap, they believed, a poisoned gift. Yet the Phaeton's proven speed and the unassailable logic of the Terrans' action, they had given the collective a way out of the unwinnable conflict with the hegemony without losing face. Cree aided an irresistible political pressure. The pirate collective, a loose alliance held together by opportunism, began to fracture. The Terran mandate was offering them an end to the conflict's root cause, the instability that fueled their raids. The hegemony, monitoring these astonishing developments, was helpless. Cathar's non-interference mandate was now an iron cage. To intervene was to prove Alara's ethical superiority invalid, to admit their own political corruption, and to risk alienating the now grateful Xylo system. The Terrans had, with a single ship, destabilized the entire geopolitical balance of the region by stabilizing the sector itself. The Phaeton returned to the hegemony's primary orbital installation with the Xylo's administrator, C.H. Laris, and several key buffer state envoys on board, an act of diplomatic unity that shattered decades of hegemony isolationism. The vessel did not dock at the standard, sterile diplomatic platform. Captain Kalen guided the Phaeton to a stable, silent hover directly over the synodic apex, a subtle but devastating show of technological and political authority. Cathar stood before the Grand Arbiter, the tension in the apex now replaced by a chilling atmosphere of profound political humiliation. Vorel was absent, politically neutralized, and confined to a military inquiry. Ambassador Alara Vance and Captain Rhys Kalen entered the synodic apex not as petitioners, but as the architects of a successful, unifying peace. Alara carried a signed treaty, the Xylo's Stabilization Compact, endorsed by Xylos, two major buffer states, and a significant major splinter faction of the Void-Scarred Pirate Collective, which had agreed to transition into a protective, self-governing trade alliance. Chief Diplomat Cathar, Alara began, her voice calm and measured, carrying the weight of undisputed accomplishment. We were given the most dangerous ship in your fleet, a vessel you believed would consume us, to deliver a minimal package of aid. We have delivered the aid, secured the region, neutralized the dominant military threat, and forged a comprehensive, ethically enforced peace treaty that guarantees the stability of your strategic flank. We did this not by wielding power, but by utilizing the Phaeton's potential for pure, uncorrupted purpose. The conquest was not of land, but of political paralysis. We have proven that the harmonic drive, and by extension, the concept of sustained, external-focused intent, is the most powerful force in this quadrant. Cathar bowed, a deep, solemn gesture that conveyed the utter surrender of the Carthian political ego. The hegemony recognizes the profound strategic and ethical implications of the Terran Mandate's actions. You have accomplished the impossible. You were given a poisoned chalice, and you transformed it into the cure for our systemic political malady. The hegemony stands ready to formally recognize the Terran Mandate's new status and to begin the comprehensive renegotiation of all strategic and trade agreements. Rhys Kalen, standing beside Alara, finally broke his sustained silence, his gaze fixed on the Grand Arbiter. His expression remained utterly calm, but there was a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in the atmosphere around him, a low, background hum of immense, focused energy, the residual effect of the Phaeton's harmonic drive, still active in a low-power mode. The political negotiation is necessary, Diplomat Cathar, but it is no longer the most pressing concern, Kalen stated, his voice carrying an unexpected, almost ominous clarity. The harmonic drive, due to its requirement for an absolute, selfless synchronization of intent, operates on a principle far deeper than mere physics. It becomes an extension of the mind, and the sustained operation through the veil allowed its advanced, long-range sensor suite, the one you deemed inoperable, to function without the hegemony's imposed limitations. The engine demanded purity of purpose, and in granting it, it unlocked a profound, previously unnoticed aspect of the greater reality. He paused, and the entire apex, which had relaxed in the momentary celebration of peace, tensed once more. This was the moment of the unexpected, the unknown variable that only the human psychological state could have revealed. During our transit, Kalen continued, his focus now absolute, mirroring the internal synchronization of the Phaeton, the drive in its stable, high-energy state detected a recurring, structured anomaly in the background radiation. This is not static. It is not natural stellar decay. It is an intentional, highly organized signal. Cathar, recovering from the initial shock, leaned forward. Signal? From where? Residual transmissions from an ancient civilization, a nearby stellar event. No, Alara interjected, projecting a simple, elegant graph onto the apex's display, a recurring mathematical sequence that defied natural explanation. The Sioux. RCE calculation places the signal's origin not in this galaxy, not even in the local galactic cluster, but from a void space beyond the established dark matter boundary of the known universe. The signal is organized, vast in scope, and ancient. Its transmission parameters suggest it has been broadcasting for an epoch, perhaps since before the hegemony began its first expansion. Kalen finished the revelation, his words resonating with the quiet, terrifying weight of cosmic discovery. The signal is not a beacon. It is a warning. Its structure contains a complex, predictive model of galactic civilization collapse, detailed across multiple, repeating cycles of expansion and decline, detailing the precise, self-destructive political and social flaws that lead to systemic failure. The final data packet, which the harmonic drive was able to fully resolve due to its unparalleled sensitivity, details a threat. Not an invading fleet, but an inevitable consequence of unchecked political self-interest. It refers to an entity, the synaptic hunger, that is drawn to the high-energy signatures of politically fragmented, self-consuming civilizations, feeding on the resulting entropy. The signal is a map, a library, and a chilling prophecy. It is a warning from beyond the cosmic veil, and it is entirely focused on the type of fractured, self-serving political systems that define the hegemony before the stability of Xylos. The ultimate twist, the larger twist predicted by the structure. The challenge was never the hegemony, or the pirates, or the Phaeton itself. The challenge was the fundamental, self-destructive nature of galactic civilization, a cycle the humans had accidentally broken by prioritizing ethical stability over political power. The ship they were given, the ship that demanded an impossible purity of intent, was not a weapon or a logistics vehicle. It was a cosmic receiver, capable of tuning into the ancient, deep space warnings that the hegemony, with its internally conflicted mind, had been entirely deaf to. The synodic apex fell into a silence deeper than before, a silence born not of political fear, but of existential dread. The hegemony had sought power in centralization and conflict. Humanity, in its chaotic emotional history, had learned the cost of that path, and thus possessed the ethical fortitude to operate a ship that demanded the opposite, singular, selfless duty. That duty had unexpectedly revealed the true, cosmic scope of their shared danger. The conquest of the world was merely the necessary prelude to the defense of the cosmos. The Grand Arbiter stirred one final time, its massive form beginning to emit a low, powerful glow. The Terrans were a test for us, a mirror we were too arrogant to look into. We built a machine that demanded purity and then failed to provide it ourselves. In our contempt, we gave the most dangerous ship to the one species capable of mastering its demand. The Xylos Stabilization Compact is not an end, Diplomat Vance. It is the beginning of the necessary unification. The synaptic hunger is drawn to chaos and conflict. The only defense is a united, self-controlled, ethical galactic front. The Terran mandate has not conquered a world, Cathar. It has revealed the necessity of conquering the flaw within all civilization. The ship was dangerous. The knowledge it has yielded is infinitely more so. We must now heed the warning of the ancestors, revealed not by our technology, but by the clean, unwavering focus of the human heart. The pale blue light of the apex intensified, no longer a symbol of political oppression, but of a sudden, terrifying, unifying clarity. The next war would not be fought with fleets, but with a philosophy. The human mission, born of a poisoned gift and an ethical promise, had transitioned from diplomacy to salvation. The Phaeton, once the symbol of the hegemony's discarded shame, now hovered, a silent, powerful testament to the fact that the greatest strategic advantage in the cosmos was not force of arms, but the unwavering focus of a disciplined, ethical mind. The humans had used the dangerous ship to conquer the self-imposed limits of the galaxy, and the true, greater frontier, the final, cosmic defense, was now irrevocably upon them. The long journey, the silent determination, the calm delivery of a simple promise. It was all a foundation, a single necessary step toward a vast, unknown alliance that would be forged in the light of the terrifying truth delivered by the most dangerous ship in the galaxy.